Hello and welcome or welcome back to this channel. My name is Frida Weisel, and in this channel, I cover topics related to Judaism, New York City, insular societies, and my special subject, Orthodox Judaism, which is where I come from, although I have left it. One of the things I pride myself on in my work is covering a great deal of the female Hasidic or Orthodox sphere, a world that is often very neglected in research, but which for me, having known pretty much only this sphere as a Hasidic female growing up in this world, is so naturally a part of the Hasidic story. I've brought to you interviews with, for instance, the famous Hasidic woman Pearl from Williamsburg, with the ex-Hasidic University of Toronto professor Naomi Seidman, with the comedian Leah Forrester, with the singer and comedian Ricky Rose, with my friend Javi Feldman, with a Hasidic Martha Stewart, Razy Fried, with a wonderful Gitta Katz, with more, and of course with my own perspective, which also comes from that world. I'm so grateful when this subject is given serious academic attention, and so guess how excited I was by the book For Women and Girls Only by Jessica Rhoda. It tells the really amazing story of what's been changing in the women's Hasidic or Orthodox world, larger Orthodox world. I have to say the changes have really surprised me, while also ostensibly this world remaining modest and for women and girls only. It's such a fascinating story of a population often seen as nothing but downtrodden and oppressed, and that the actual story is so much more complicated. And so I'm delighted to discuss all this today with the author of the book. Jessica Rhoda is an author and anthropologist specializing in music and religion, and is the assistant professor of Jewish civilization at Georgetown University. Welcome, Jessica. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Frida. This is such an honor and a privilege to be in conversation with you today. Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Well, you've now become, by being on my channel, you've become part of the subject, no? Because my channel is a part of the entertainment of the, as I see it, of the women and girls scene to some degree, in some ways. So by being a part of that, you're now the subject of your research.
That's true. This kind of this interesting circle, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And also being outsider, insider, who exactly are we when we write and we are not coming from the community? So that's very special.
Yeah. So in that note, okay, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I don't know if I know you besides for the fact that I was once in Canada and I was walking in the street. I think you were pushing a stroller and you were like, "Hi, I'm Jessica," something like that. And you said you were doing research on this population. This is many years ago.
Yes, that was many years ago. And indeed, it was at the really beginning in 2016 when I was living in Montreal, and I was really helping the development of this organization forward to support people who wanted to leave the community. And I knew about you, and I was very connected to essentially people who left. So talking about me, who I am, and to write this book as well. So I grew up in French Guiana, a place that a lot of people do not necessarily know in South America, where we speak French and Creole. I'm French. My mom was born in North Africa, in Algeria. My father was born in France, coming from Sephardic family, but there was a mix background in my family from both, essentially from my mother's side.
What do you mean by that?
That on my great grandmothers, they were married Catholic. So on my mother's side, so they became Catholic in North Africa. But my mom, and this is something that I really talk about, my mom grew up in a foster home with a lot of kids from, Jewish kids, Muslim, Christian, who were all a little bit illegitimate. Yes, so that's her background. So, and always this search for, identity. It was something I grew up with. My parents were hippies. They met in France and they decided to travel a lot. I have a brother. Even with my brother, we travel in Australia, in the Caribbean, in a lot of different places. And they decided to settle in French Guiana. Because, it was far from the family, and my mom wanted to always be safe, as she said. It's, very interesting life. My father was a technician in AC, so he stopped school at 14. My mom went a little bit longer in school, but we grew up in a very diverse environment. And I was already, as a small child, fascinated by cultural diversity. I didn't grow up at all in a Jewish environment. French Guiana is essentially Christian. I was drawn sometimes to churches. I had Christian friends, and I was fascinated and interested also in their life. Then when I was 12, I went to the UK to meet a cousin, a part of the family that married Ashkenazi, Holocaust survivor. And this is 3 cousins. And this is when I started to connect a little bit with my Jewishness. Also discovering at the time one of the cousins was in a kibbutz in Israel, and, the journey started. But then I went in India. So another journey. And then when I moved to France to study musicology at 17, I reconnect really with my Jewish roots and Jewish community and Jewish culture, but it was Sephardic.
You were a performer.
Yes. So I moved from French Guiana to France to study piano, flute, dance, and musicology. But this journey was essentially, a kind of a connection with Jewishness and the art. But the connection between both just came when I actually moved to Montreal as an exchange student in 2001, and I discovered ethnomusicology. I had an amazing mentor at the time, and I also discovered at the same time the Hasidic community. So my Jewish environment was really French, Sephardic, North African, and then, discovering and learning about the Hasidic community and their music, I was like blown away. And I thought, oh my God, I want to know more about this community who did the opposite of my family, Then I went back to France, and I've met an amazing scholar and writer. His name is Hervé Roten. He writes a lot he's the head of the Institute for Jewish Music in Paris. And he offered me to work on people who were more like me, who were disconnected from their Jewishness and who reconnect with music. And that's my journey into the Sephardic world, into Ladino music and Judo-Spanish. So that's my first life. I like to say that this is my first life. And I wrote my first book in French. Then I came back to Montreal. I immigrated, and then I worked a little bit with the Moroccan Jewish community in Montreal. Few projects, notably with the daughter of Sami El Maghribi, who was a very important, he was a superstar in Morocco, and then he became the cantor at the Spanish and Portuguese. Salomon Amzalag, that's the name of the cantor. And then at the time in Montreal, we started to have Félix Elmira. I don't know if you know this, I'm sure you know this movie.
The movie, yeah, I've watched it.
Yes. And I remember going there, and it was like, oh my God, again, like the Hasidic culture came back. And
we should probably explain what the movie is, or maybe we should insert the trailer here.
Yes, that's a good idea to maybe accept the trailer.
It's beautiful. Wait, a kiss for your girl. My name is Felix.
Kim, Shabbos. Ok. Qu'est-ce que vous faire?
Problème de noise, você marque. Est-ce que ce serait possible de rentrer pour écouter de la musique?
Oui. Oui.
It became very, very popular because it won an award, and it was selected for a few other awards. There's this love story with a Hasidic woman who was saved by this Quebec man. And I thought to myself at the time, wow, I really would love to go back and to learn about this community. And few moments, I had a colleague, when I talked about that, one person told me, you don't speak Yiddish, forget about it. But, that's not a problem. You don't speak the language. You can learn a little bit, or it's not your community, forget about it. And then I had a discussion with a friend at the time, and she told me about this underground community and people who left. And at the time, she told me about this documentary, Not One of Us. It was a Canadian one, and then I blank. Eric, and what is the fold? There is fold in it. Oh my God, blanking.
I've never heard of it. Was it
It's
very
about
popular?
It was not very popular because indeed, Leaving the Fold, Leaving the Fold. Now I remember about it. So this is by my colleague and friend, Eric Scott. So she told me about this film called Leaving the Fold, but people living in the community, and actually they talk about in the movie, Eric Scott talk about Basia Shaster.
Yeah.
Also about two
Who's
other men.
an ex-acidic singer.
And also two other men from Montreal. And then I was like, oh, there is this community of people living. And I said, I want to work there. I want to do something. I really wanted, at the time, I lost a dear friend. And I thought, I really want to do research that is meaningful and that is about connecting with people. And that's how everything started.
Wow. How long did you work on the book? How many years?
You know, it's a good question also because I started to do this research. I didn't know I will write about the arts. That's my specialty. But at the time, I was fascinated by kinship beyond blood and by this idea of creating community beyond, you know, your family. And I was also interested in sexuality. So I started to get access, I would say 2015, and progressively, so you read the book, so I also progressively connected with families, with women in the community in Montreal. I taught piano to some girls, also French, and then also to a group of women. And it was just the idea of connecting and learning about Hasidic life through the arts. I was myself, I didn't see that, but if I was from Orthodox for a few years when I was in Montreal. So I had a knowledge and an understanding of, you know, Frumkeit in a way, more Chabad, I would say. In some way, I think that the women knew that it wasn't my interest was not to become religious. Was my connection was through the arts and music. And I think, you know, because a lot of women are very proud of that, and just to say that they also have the artistic, you know, talent in painting, in a lot of different sphere. So that was a kind of a way also to connect. And I wrote the proposal in 2019, 2020, because initially the book was supposed to be about male artists who were public. So I interviewed Lipa Schmelzer at the time. I was starting to talk also with Yankee Lemmer.
Oh, really? Maybe you should connect me to them because I want to interview them for my channel.
Yes, I'm sure
They're out there.
Yes, they're out there. So Lipa was at Columbia at the time.
All right.
He was at Columbia, and I was at Columbia as well. So we connected through that lens. It was in 2017, and Yankee Lemmer, I wrote him in 2018. And I also tried to reach out to Shulim, but I think he responded. But we never did the interview with both of them because I just progressively the project, the woman took over. Because my friend in Montreal started to say, yes, Jessica, we have this Rachel's Place. I said, what is Rachel's Place? Yeah, you know, we have musicals and very professional one. And then there is the one that we do in schools in Montreal. And it started to grow. So I thought, it's not about men public and women private. There is something else here happening. So I decided to say, okay, bye-bye the men.
That's great.
And yeah.
Because the story for men is like out there. A part of what's so interesting about the story for women is that they are negotiating needing to be modest while also becoming very public. So, and this is something your book really grasps. Different women dealing with that in different ways. Some women deal with it by not showing their faces, but many women deal with it by saying, I am, you know, just slapping a label on for women and girls only. It's on you. And also the way some women will work around rabbinic expectations. It's a very complicated story. I sort of want to touch on the nuances, but I want to start, I guess, from the beginning with like old school for women only before the internet performances. Like, okay, the internet pretty much changed everything, especially COVID. But before that, what kind of entertainment, arts and entertainment scene did you experience? Because I feel like in the book we get a sense of what that was. You seem to have participated. What did you experience was happening for women and girls in the Orthodox community?
Yes, so it is essentially actually the chapter private performer. So this is what is happening in summer camp, what is happening in schools, what is happening in closed doors, the gathering that women may have. They decide to just get together and to sing together when the men are not there, or the Shabbos table as well. All this universe. I mean, I start the book with the story of Goldie, and that was, I would say, one of the most powerful moments for me. The first time I went to Rivka, her mother's Shabbat dinner, and this is
How
a
did
very,
you know
as they
them?
call. So actually, her husband was involved in the music industry, and somebody in New York connected me, said, so maybe his wife knows something about music. So I wrote him, and then he asked her, and she welcomed me. And it took, some time. And I remember the first time, it was very impressive because, as I describe in the book, the girls were so kind of proud also. And it was a kind of not a competition between the boys and the girls, but they were singing as loud as the boys, and very confident. And it was like polyphony, a lot of different voices. And as we say in the community, it's a very musical family. It's a very, very musical family. And then I taught the piano.
This is
to
at the
three
Shabbos
girls.
table?
Yes.
This was at the
yes.
Shabbos table?
No, the piano was not at the Shabbos.
No.
Following
I
that.
mean, I'm talking about what you were experiencing. The
Yes.
girls and the boys singing was at the Shabbos table.
Yes, as the Shabbos table. And then also when we were doing the piano lessons, that was also a universe where there was a lot of song, a lot of also the games. And anytime there was a simcha or holidays also, I heard about, they were going to the studio to record a song, and that it would be a gift. So that was also kind of a very interesting aspect of, it's not the internet, but actually then they were sending by email to their cousins in New York or in Israel. But that was a very special universe for them to make music and to perform music. I mean, in my case, as I told you, I taught them piano as well. And following some of them, I was connected to other women who were also, in New York and who had a recording studio. And I trace, you interview Naomi Sedman, so I trace really this, the emergence, the transformation of this for women and girls only practices into a market, a commodity, to the schools, actually. So Sarah Schneer's, where she developed and integrated theater as a way for girls to connect and to feel, entertained. The entertainment feels, for me, always very, very vibrant. Yes,
Yeah, for
especially
women.
for girls. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just going to say Sarah Schneer is the founder of the Beis Yaakov movement. She founded it in Poland in the 1920s, I think 1930s.
Yes.
And she was revolutionary in bringing religious education to girls. And for her, performance was an integral part of the religious education for girls. And that legacy has trickled down. Even though I went to like a Satmar girls' school, we still had performances more so than the boys. And I would say that's probably the Beis Yaakov influence. But also, I had a really funny discussion with my cousin recently where I told her, aren't you going to one of those slide presentations during Passover, during the intermediate days when everyone's going? And she said, you know what? I'm just not up for the screaming. And I'm like, what do you mean the screaming? And she's like, the show hasn't even started. And everyone's like, ah! Like the way she described it, you can just see like the first beat is on the screen and the entire audience is like, absolutely
Yes.
enraptured. It's like amazing. And my cousin's like, maybe I'm not so excited about these things anymore. But it seems to be the littlest things are so exciting. And it reminded me of my own experience when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
There was a family that rented the slide presentation Forgotten. Have you heard of this Israeli woman who makes slideshows?
Yes.
I think there's-
Yes.
What's her name? Do you know?
I don't know her name. I don't know her name.
I think it's mentioned in the book.
Not Miriam. Miriam Israeli is a composer. So That's who's or is she a filmmaker who made the films? One of the pioneer.
Yeah, one of the pioneer
Yeah.
filmmakers. We called it a
forgot.
slideshow. Yeah.
Yes,
I don't
yes,
remember her
yes.
name either. It'll come to me. But
It's in the
one
book,
of-
so
yeah, well, look, the people will read the book and they can find it there. This is a good plug for the book. I'm going to link the
Yes.
book. Yes. But I don't remember her name. But her show made a very big impression on me because it was the beginning of entertainment for females. So I was born in 85 and I was maybe 10, 13 years old when someone rented the slide presentation Forgotten, and it was like a bunch of slides on a wheel, and you turned on a cassette to run alongside the slides, and it was about someone who had amnesia, and we weren't allowed to go to the performance, but we looked at it through the basement window. We looked in and we watched it that way, and it was like the most amazing experience of my life. To like, I can now watch the most high production value
yeah.
movie and it'll not come close to Forgotten from peeking in through the basement window to watch that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that like, I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's like there was a world of female performance that I'm remembering as I read your book that started to develop that was like incredibly exciting. There's a lot of
Yes,
energy
yes.
around it.
And even the first one who had recordings, Rogelia Miller, that I talk about, I interview her. Actually, she gave me a lot of cassette, and I did a transcription. Now I have it digitally, and I send it to her. This first generation, who were playing a little bit with the recording as well. And
What do you
indeed,
mean
in
by
Montreal, that they had cassettes, and they
Oh.
they were doing recording, they were doing tours, but they were not in the magazine, so it was just word of mouth. So, and I remember I did an interview with a woman in Montreal who was part of the first group in the 30s in Williamsburg, where the first Besyakov cohort. And I asked her, did you have, what about the entertainment? And even following, she said that it was at the time, it was very almost nothing. So it was very hard to identify also the transformation of what exactly happened, before, pre-war, post-war. But it's clear that some scholars were saying also that in the 70s, Satmar started to be much more strict in terms of not having non-Jewish, content or play. So when you start to have those kind of rules, it means that it existed. Otherwise, you don't have the norm.
The
Why
need
would
for
you forbid?
rules.
Exactly. Why would you forbid? And it's because you have it. And it's not because you say that you cannot have it that it's not going to appear, But that's pretty clear that indeed, maybe already in the 60s, it would be interesting to ask actually this is something I didn't do that much, to interview generation of like your parents, for
Yeah.
instance.
It is interesting because my mother went to Besyakov because there wasn't a Satmar yet. And we grew up with her telling us the stories of the plays she had seen, which often didn't have a moral. They weren't about faith. They were just comedies, like a comedy about a king who had very stupid constituencies, who did stupid things. It had no moral. My mother would tell us the story. We wouldn't be exposed to what she had been exposed. So
Exposed.
Yeah, what you're saying is very true. There was a constriction for us of things she had been exposed to that we weren't allowed to have anymore.
Yeah. And the idea of developing or transforming the play, maybe taking the musical content, but changing it and making faith-based and Jewish, more specifically,
Yeah.
This idea of making a Jewish play. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually something I was curious to hear from you about. You went to one of those plays, or did you go?
Yes.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to tell me about the experience?
Woof. Yeah. Which one are you asking? The one in the school?
Yeah. A school
Yes.
play. An
The school play.
old-fashioned Hasidic school
all
play.
Spain. So I even had the luxury, principal of the school trusted me, and I watched one of the few recording of the school. So I worked with this school, and it was I was just blown away. I was the only one who was not Hasidic. It's my dear friend who gave me access. It's every 3 years in Montreal. And I was just blown away, not only but the fact that they did it in 3 weeks, extremely fast. The costumes, the colors, the fact that a lot of material were also pre-recorded to make sure that the quality would be, good enough, and on, a certain tune. The dancing, the choreography. So the fact that you had an entire team of the head of the dance, the head of the choir, also that everybody had a little part. So all the girls had a little solos to give visibility. There was something interesting also, and I don't develop that much in the book about visibility, trying to include and to, there was a girl with a Down syndrome who was at the center giving all the attention instead of, putting her on the side, pushing her to the side and making her invisible. I wonder, how it was 20 years ago. But it was very interesting, the fact that the emphasis of was we need to give voices to all the girls. And they had auditions as well. And it was over a few nights. So I was everything was in Yiddish. So it's not like, I know that in Borough Park there's kind of a mix. Everything was in Yiddish. I had the script. There was a religious story, the Greek, who trying to, to convert the Jews, but in the end they were successful to keep the faith. But I was it was the kind of any kind of amazing play that you go to any school, even maybe better, so, and they work very hard. Actually, there's going to be another one now. It's usually December, January. So my friend said if I want to come again. And it was long.
Do you feel out of place?
When I go there?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Do you put your hair in a ponytail or something?
Oh, yeah. No, I have a little band. I of course, I don't dress that way. Even if, when I go in a Trumon now, they know me. I used to live also during. But anytime I enter a Hasidic home, I really go snail. So no question. And of course, in those places. But even that way, it's like, who is this one,
Yeah. They can tell.
But I'm okay. I'm good. Yeah, that's fine with the look, So I was very surprised by and I talk about it in the performing the chapter on the private performer.
What do you mean it was long? It's like no intermission. There is intermission.
There was an intermission, but it was maybe 3 hours. And also I went for the rehearsal the day before, so it was very long. I don't know if you play, but everybody, you can speak, you can, but it was long. It was very long. They worked very hard,
Why only 3 weeks?
Because they didn't have that much time, I think, because they wanted, they needed to have the entire team, the costume and everybody. And before that, they have school. So this is the break. Because they have the winter break. So because the school I was working with, so they follow also the calendar of regular school in Montreal. So they have the 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, and then they need to go back. So the schedule to have so much time to be able to rehearse. So, and then of course I didn't go to summer camp, but then I know that in summer camp they also do it, but it's different.
I see. So, there used to be plays and there used to be comedy shows like Leah Forrester.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can describe what has been changing over the years, like over the last 20 years in this female. I know it's a big ask. It's a big question. We can take it bit by bit.
There is a big change. This is the core of the book, is that it was essentially social, maybe cultural, and, for religious purposes. And now this is Parnasse. This is an economy. This is a very vibrant economy. It's also global. The fact that there's a circulation of plays from, Muncie to Montreal to London, a circulation of material, a circulation of artists. So you had that, but it's just an explosion. And also there has been a very strong democratization. The fact that all the girls can just go in a studio for not that much money and record it, so this accessibility of making music. You don't need necessarily to be good at the piano, to be good at the guitar, but if you want to make a little bit of music, okay, you need computer somebody, even if you don't sing very well, there is a way for you to have something and so the democratization of the music and the film as well. The fact that now you have films as well. So yeah, we are now into a market on one hand for the most private one and informal market. And the one who decided to really go fully and to say, we're gonna be in the industry, in the kosher music industry, we're gonna do the same level than men, like Bracha Jaffa, Deborah Schwartz, Dobie Baum as well, those one, or Chaya Kogan, Shani Pletzger, who are kind of Hasidic, also Litvish, but this creates also a community where it's not only which community are you coming from. Are you Belz? Are you Satmar? Are you Ger? Are you... No, there's a kind of... Are you Bobov? I'm talking about the filmmaker Malki Weingarten. But no, there's this community of frum female artists. And that's the other big change, I would say. Oh, and the third one is the explosion also of, connecting to wellness and disability, all those programs with the arts.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think with regards to the second point about the community of artists, I think this is something a lot of people on my channel are often confused about. Why don't you bring on this person or that person that I usually try to bring on people, for instance, who are Hasidic. That's like what fascinates me. But I think this is very correct in your book. You can be, let's say, a more modern, what you call modern ultra-Orthodox woman, and you would never be accepted in, let's say, Kiryas Joel, where I grew up. You're too modern. But a contingent of people in Kiryas Joel will consume that media. So even though there is a cross-section of different kinds of Orthodox women working in this sphere, their reach is generally throughout the entire Orthodox sphere.
Yes. And the other interesting, so Dobie Baum, for instance, is Hasidic. She's coming from a Hasidic family from London. I talk about it also in the book. Hani Rosengarten, she's, the writer who is from New Square, right? But she moved out from New Square. So you have some Hasidic figure like this who are artists and who indeed it wouldn't fit anymore into New Square or to Kiryas Joel. But because the community, so in Kiryas Joel, there is this band by Toby, right? Toby created this band and she performed in this facility for women, when they I forgot the name, I didn't go there. When they give birth. So
yeah,
everybody
knows.
It's called Aishas Chayil, exactly. So she performs there. She has also other type, but it's a very, she's not online. She's not Bracha Jaffa, right? This is very, very different type of production. But indeed, the fact that when you go to Montreal and I said, oh yeah, I interview Bracha Jaffa and they're like this, Or when I talk about, Malki Weingarten is also Hasidic, but still the consumption, and it was Satmar family, Even if some will not go to the concert, but actually Bracha was invited in some women-only event to come to perform. And I think that they would rather invite Bracha because she's not from the same community than inviting somebody like Dobie Baum, who is, Hasidic, but who this is okay. She's like, Flatbush. She's not Bell. She's not Satmar. But imagine if you have, a Satmar, celebrity, that would be a little, or somebody who moved away. I don't think they would be as comfortable.
Yeah, there's
even if the person didn't leave,
Yeah, there's an element of not trusting people who are on what's called the slippery slope. Like, if you have made changes and you're one of us, then we trust you less than if you're a complete outsider. Well, if you're an Orthodox woman, but you're an outsider, then that makes your modernity more trustworthy.
Exactly. Yeah, you put it greatly.
Let's talk about some of these women's stories. Toby, first of all, really fascinated me. Toby, she has a band and she's in Kiryas Joel. What is she doing? What is her story?
So she's teaching also instruments. She's teaching violin. She has a lot of groups of girls. She has this private practice. She rents a studio where you can learn violin. You can learn so she's fascinated by instruments. So she wanted to learn the saxophone. So she ordered a saxophone, and then she started to learn by herself. Same thing with the violin. So she's also playing the piano. And she is just fascinated and inspired by music, and she wants to create possibility for girls to have this opportunity. And also the band is with other women, and sometimes they go from community to another. She's a very and she has the full support also of her husband. But indeed, they are careful also to make sure that. You read the interview. People know her, but they don't really know her. So she's Toby, but without her family name, in case, it goes, because it's all a lot about don't ask, don't tell, right?
What do you mean by that? Can you explain what you mean by that?
By the fact that she didn't ask if she can do the band. She, didn't go to a rabbinic authority to have Hechsher. And same thing with most of the women for the film, and they don't want. So they will not do that. Maybe some of them will. Yes, I think Shandy Platzker asked me, it was in the introduction, because I exchanged also my material, what I wrote with some of them. And she said, actually, I asked. So she wanted to make sure that, because indeed, rabbinic authority is like pretty broad. But yeah, that's Toby. I talk also in this chapter about Blimy. She's in Williamsburg. And there was a story, and I think you, Frida, you mentioned you remember when there was a backlash?
Chimes, yeah. I did a video on it. It's one of my first videos. It didn't get a lot of views, but it was about chimes. It was a woman, her name is Blimy, that was at the center of it. I didn't even know, because I only have the ad for chimes, and it says, come to this kumzitz. Maybe I can edit it into this video. And then the backlash, rabbis who are like, this is unacceptable, and saying the most ridiculous things, to the modern ear, which is like the woman should be in the home. They shouldn't be doing kumzitzes.
Yeah. So she is not advertising, but she still has her studio.
She still has her studio. See, this is such a great example. So a story that the media might take away from something like this is the Hasidic community shuts down women, women being bullied, the end. But the actual story is two extremist rabbis picking on a woman who strategically keeps her head down until that passes and survives. And those rabbis have limited power, right? Their power was to bully her for 5 minutes. And if she strategically responded to it, she's able to navigate it and to sort of disarm them.
Yes. So indeed, it depends on which type of feminist or agency. I hate to say that because they would not like the fact that I will use feminist. It depends on which type of woman you are, right? Which type of, strategy you want. But there is this idea of, do you want to win the war or the battle? So, and you can go after, each battle, or just like, what is the war? The fact that they want me to shut down? No, I'm going to continue. But I'm going to lose the battle. I don't care. I find other ways.
Yeah, so she was like, I'm canceling the get-together of playing music. I'm waiting it out. And she continues to just teach music. And I'm sure by now she's probably back to getting women together to play.
Yes. I mean, personal life. She might be, very busy now. But yes, and I visited her too. After writing, actually, I had a friend who put me in touch with her. And I had this privilege of going to her studio where she teaches. It was incredible. With so many instruments everywhere. It was very, very special.
Wow. What are the ages of the women who would go to her studio? Do you know?
Oh, so for the class, it's essentially for girls. But then for the kumzit, it's, anyone, And I've been to a few gatherings like this also. You may have a discussion about issues of fertility or women, and then at the end they want to sing, and you have somebody who who came out. I don't remember. Maybe actually that night was from. It was in New Jersey, the event. No, Long Island. And indeed, somebody came with a guitar, I think from Muncie, I don't remember, Hasidic, and just playing a little entertainment.
And everyone sings along.
Yes, exactly.
What do they play? Yiddish songs,
The
English
guitar,
songs?
yes, Yiddish song. That was Yiddish song. It was essentially Yiddish song that night. And no, there was no English, actually. There was no English.
Do you know, have you picked up any of the Hasidic Yiddish songs along the way?
No, I don't remember. That was 2 years ago, and I didn't.
No, I mean in
because
general. In general.
In general, those gathering, no, not that much, no, because I didn't attend that many of those gathering, those private gathering. But for instance, in the play, in many cases, they will take, either traditional song or new popular song. There was this album of Yiddish chords. I have it here, and they decided to take the same melody, and they just transform the lyrics. So kind of the hot, songs that are usually performed by men, and they will take the same melody.
Like which song?
Yingelech. You know this album?
No, I do not.
So it's Moshe Lofer and Naftali Schnitzler production, and the composition, I don't remember what it was, but that's essentially kind of new compositions. Moilech, something like this.
I see.
I can share with you, and if you want to put it,
We
the
can put-
original, we can put it, and then not the women, because this is also something I do. I never, for the private one, I never advertise it. But the one who is, celebrity, they have no problem. Say it's for women and girls only. It's out there. It's the responsibility of men. But the
Yeah.
one who are, private, the school or a private performer, I never accept. Not publicly, but I can share with you. And I'm sure.
Yeah. I get that. I get that. I would love to do a video like watching Rachel's Play show, like they do these, like Annie, right? I think they did an adaptation. I have never watched any of these because our family was so conservative that there were some families in Curacao that watched things, and my family was too conservative for it. So I never, except for Forgotten Through the Basement Window, I never saw these like English language women's performances as a kid. So I don't know what Rachel's play is like, for instance, what those plays are like. And I really, really would love to share it with my audience. In an ideal world, I'd watch it, I'd summarize it, I'd do a video about it, but I would never do it because it would be a violation of these women's like ask, which is it's for women and girls only. Even if some of them might quietly, secretly wish that their work would be out there.
Yes, but I think the one that are on YouTube, you may be able. Like Rafa, Dobie.
Yeah. But they're not plays, they're music.
No, they're music. Yes, that's true. But Malky Ginniger, she would never, And the Rachel's Play. I mean, you can buy the DVDs, so it's accessible. But they don't make it available on YouTube. And the other important part is that all those plays, when they're, it's for tzedakah, right? So they're collecting money because Rachel's Place is a place to help girls who are, at risk or on the street. So this is a home as well. Yes. So this is a home, Rachel's Place, and Miriam Handler, who was the musical director, but this is a big organization.
I see. And you also, I think, talked about like some of the musical performances being for like infertility charities or something like that.
Yes, that there was a controversy around this song, Bezakeni, recorded initially by Benny Friedman. And women themselves were saying, hey, this is a song for women, fertility, to encourage us to donate on, just before lighting the candle for Shabbos. And then you don't have women. So then they decided to record the Devorah Schwartz and Raj Jaffa.
As I stand in candlelight, with my hands upon my eyes, there's a passion in my prayers eyes.
Interesting. You know why that part was particularly interesting was because for a while there were advertisements in Hasidic Williamsburg for this infertility charity that were two giant posters on a like street pole. On the one side, it was an old man alone on a couch looking despondent. And on the other side, it was this old man with a bunch of children and grandchildren. And it was like, this is what your funding is doing. It's bringing him joy. Now,
Yeah.
the woman who is really at the center of the infertility story
Yeah.
is not pictured at all.
At all.
And at all. And it's all about presenting the pain of infertility through this older man.
Man,
Yeah. And when I walked through
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. But like when I walk through the streets of Williamsburg, I just see the posters. I don't see commentary. I don't see reactions. It seems to me like integrated in the fabric of the neighborhood where people are like, well, this is what you got to do in order to not get in trouble with like zealots who are going to say, what are women doing on the street, on the street signs? But the internet seems to be a space where you can say something and where women are saying something or people are saying something.
And you know, the magazines as well, the press, you know, I just have Amy Leaving over there, you know, a stack of Amy Leaving. So you won't see also their face. The Mishpacha online, you know, no, you won't see also their face. But you can Google some of them, you know, and you will see their face. But others decided that they won't do that. And we didn't talk about it, but I'm curious also if you had the chance to look at the last chapter also about artists who left the community.
Yes, I want to talk to you about that in a minute. I just want to
Okay.
talk about it is very interesting. But the face issue is especially interesting because I think a lot of women are sympathetic to not showing faces.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there are
Mary-
people like Flatbush Girl who's like, let's show faces. But I think a lot of women are very okay with that.
Yes, and actually it's interesting that on the music video of Zahini, Miriam Israeli, who composed the song, she was totally okay. For her, the opposite. The same thing, Hala Newhouse. It's very interesting. Hala Newhouse, she's a Hasidic composer. She's now based in Lakewood, and she composed for men. That was, you know, her way to become also famous and to make her music out there. But she has performance with thousands of girls. I went to one 2 years ago, but you will never see her face. Even for her studio, she has this very famous studio. You won't see her face. You won't hear her voice online. But she supports, you know, women like Bracha Jaffa or Deborah Schwartz who are doing it. But this is not her norm, you know, and she doesn't want, you know, to go there. So that's, you know, interesting dynamic.
Another thing that's interesting is that even in the most conservative communities, women will perform voice-wise with lectures. They'll give lectures on hotlines,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they will not give lectures in video. It's almost like video is the line that a lot of women
Yes.
won't cross.
That's true. The face, because also, the hotline when you can listen to the new composition, even singing. Some of the, I remember the song that I talk about in the private performer. It was, oh my God, I forgot the name of the song that it was. They did a cover in English, in Yiddish. I think it was Harashot. It was initially performed by Benny Friedman, and then they did a cover in English and in Yiddish and in English, but you were able to compose a hotline to listen to it.
It's
So-
interesting because the real prohibition for women is singing. You know, they're not allowed to
Yes.
be heard singing. And I
Yeah.
think when I think about it, why they are so much more careful about their faces. First of all, as a content creator who puts my face out in the world, I think there's a lot of pressure on women on presenting their faces that there
Yeah.
isn't in the voice. Like, so that's like outside of modesty. I find it really difficult to have my face involved with my work, but also I think it speaks to the community's insularity that once your face is out there, you become a celebrity, and the idea of the celebrity is still evolving in this world.
Yes, constantly moving. I think it's a good question because indeed, but on the other hand, the internet just allows, you know, to break the boundaries of both of the sound and of the voice. But yeah, the fact that you still have the hotline and even the recording studio, You can have the song circulating from a house to another. But they will do that also with with family, private photos.
But not so much videos, not so much women filming
No
themselves.
singing and dancing. Yes, acting, like the movement of the video. Yes, that's true. That's true. But maybe it will change. I don't know.
How do you find that the concept of celebrity is changing?
This is such a big topic, but indeed the tension between the individual and the collective that is indeed connected to modesty, to what exactly you're supposed to, how are you supposed to be at the center. So what is fascinating with the development of the industry is that they also justify or doing it for the girls. And that's how they're able to maintain this for women and girls only, but it's to serve the girls, to make sure they have good role models, that they have good messages instead of, slippery side to go and to listen and to have other type of role model. So they are serving the collective. And this is where also we can learn. When I say we, the liberal world can learn about those different ways of being famous, right? And creating a community. The internet also transcends the border, but there is something very interesting in this indigenization of the celebrity culture, and also new ways of, because they are a small community, those celebrities. They're very small, but they're consumed largely. One of the music videos is 500,000 views. Who is consuming? It's hard to say, but there's definitely a large group of women consuming that. And it's in North America, and now I have a group of colleagues in Israel. They're working on the same project, not the same project, but to investigate women-only performance, which is a different, very different things happening in Israel.
Oh, really? Do you know what's happening?
So, for instance, for Slichot, because it's subsidized by government to have events that are religious, cultural, artistic, and also for women. So my friend Naomi Zenton-Cohen, who is working on this with Abigail Wood, they have this project in Israel, and they found out that actually there was last year 40, I think if I remember properly, over 40 concerts, slichot, that women were organizing. The other interesting aspect is you have a school for film, for the industry. They also have program within the music department where you can have women only. So the fact that indeed the state facilitates women only courses or education, it creates it's pretty different.
That's a very interesting, like maybe there's the profit motive. You need to recoup your investment that is driving that. Fascinating. There's lots to explore there of what's happening in Israel. One of the frustrating things about being interested in what's happening in the Orthodox Jewish community is that it feels like the research ends with Hebrew, and then there's a new body of research. There's like almost no communication between Israeli Hebrew sociology and the English language sociology.
That's true. I think there is a Haredi research group. I think there's a lot of Israeli scholars it's true. But the same thing, in France, I'm just gonna mention that recently I also discovered the community of double lifers in French, but who moved to Israel, but they have influencer in French, and they call it apostat. This is a friend of mine who was explaining to me, and I was listening, and it was so fascinating because he was talking like if he was alone. I said, "Don't worry, you're not alone." And it's not Haredim, it's not just Orthodox Jews. It's kind of, I would say, just Orthodox, who grew up in Paris, and a lot of them Medalia, but they speak in French. So it's kind of the language,
Fascinating.
It's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Well, let's wrap up the interview by going to the final chapter where you talk about something that is very relevant to me. And I actually really appreciated how you tackled the subject of the public figure, of the person who leaves the fold and becomes a voice, like what I would say to the wider world, like the target audience becomes the wider world. Although I would say by now, the audience has become really blended on the internet, both the wider world but one of the things you talk about is Malki Squared, Melissa Weiss, right? And Malky, what's her name?
Goldman.
Two women, both from the Hasidic community, from really the ultra of the ultra, who are actresses who are now in the performing arts in the wider world, and they're navigating that in particular. You want to talk to that?
Yeah, actually, Malky Goldman now is in Israel for a very big production, a film production that's going to be, so it's going to come in a few months from now. But
English language?
No, Hebrew.
Got it.
In Hebrew. And what is interesting, or what I tried to do with this last chapter, is also to unpack the stereotypes on people living the community, the same, and here there's a, that's the scholar, right, thinking there's a paper to write about even your work, Frida, as you said, blending, and also have people reaching out from inside and from outside, kind of creating this mix. And what was very interesting with the case of Malky is that she's teaching also in the community. She still, has an impact to, when she goes to the garage and she teaches to girls. So that's, her way to also constantly be connected with her family, of course, but trying to see what is happening. And the other interesting part is that for me, the idea of performing Hasidicness is not performing Jewishness. And this is something that the understanding of Hasidic life, and that's why, when you talk about cultural appropriation and about representation of minorities, it's very important. It's not because you're Jewish that you will understand or you will act better than if you're non-Jewish. Maybe there is this idea that, if the person, but I think this is why, and this is what they are trying to do. And the study case is really on Malky and Melissa because I was very close to their work. But you have other figures where they're really trying to reshape the industry, the Hollywood. So they are consulting. They are really trying to diversify the images. So there is also Lily Rosen, who is, doing this play. There's a lot of different actors that are really trying. Perel Gluck, who is also this filmmaker that I talk about in the book, is trying to impact and deconstruct the image. And this is also something that you're doing also in your own work with all your video. And it has been very interesting also to follow the transformation also of your work. And you may have a lot to say about that too.
Yeah. Well, I will say with regards to the last chapter where you talk about being ex-Hasidic and continuing to represent the world you come from. And like Malky Goldman says, she is Hasidic. She might have left it, but it's like been implanted in her, that carrying that onwards. I felt very heard. I felt very seen. I felt like it represented my own experience. I really appreciated in the final chapter that you talk about media representation in a way that to me felt much needed critically. For instance, Felix and Maria, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I watched that. It was very tropey to me. It was the same old, and the media and the critics fall over themselves. There is again a narrative of an oppressed woman who is saved by a secular person with a love story. It couldn't be more a fantasy of the secular world. It couldn't be less curious about the actual Hasidic community. And what I loved about your chapters, you gave a voice to those who are OTD, who are essentially being asked to act as cultural approvers of these productions. We are asked, come in here and look at it and tell us how amazing it is, tell us how accurate we are, but really we don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
And I heard that frustration in what they were both talking about with Unorthodox and with other productions, where I think in particular was Melissa was talking
Romeo
about
and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet. Yes.
Yeah. You want to talk about what happened there?
Yeah, so apparently there was not supposed to have a nude scene, and indeed the nude scene was kept. So it was supposed to be just in the back, and it was kept. And there is not only Melissa, but there is also, I know that Isaac Schoenfeld, who is in it in the movie, and he accepted in case there was not going to be a nude. But it seems that the filmmaker didn't that was her last choice. That was her choice at the to not listen to that. I mean, she I had a brief conversation with her. She disagreed, but that's the fact. If some people felt that there was a kind of a form of orientalization.
Exploitation.
Yes, and maybe that it's very hard sometimes. I was thinking about when do you see that? People don't necessarily see that. You know, the same issue with gender. They don't necessarily see that. Yes, there is discrimination because certain things are structural. So if you're liberal woman, you work in the industry, you may not think that you will also be in a form of orientalization. And this is something that I try myself. I also got in because of that, because of this fascination. So and we all have bias. The same, you know, if you're religious, you also have your fantasy about the liberal world and how terrible they, the lack of thinking that you have multiple realities existing at the same time. So that was very unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate.
I will say this. I am not against people who are not from the community doing work on it. I think your work, for instance, is really good. You know, I don't have a problem with it. I think there are, like, you took the time to understand your subject. You took the time to represent it in a way that I think is enriching because you come from a very complex, you bring your own background, of course, that is nuanced, that is feminist, that understands different kinds of women's struggles. And I think that really enhances your work. A lot of times when people do it from the inside, they are lacking that, right? So I don't think it's a problem if outsiders create content about a minority group, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be done in the right way. When it comes to like pop culture media, like the show Unorthodox, or these other typical tropey stories, there are multiple levels for me of violations in not only the creators being so ambitious in like, let me tell the story the world wants to hear and give it to them and propagate these myths, but also using OTD people.
Yes, to legitimize.
To legitimize it. Exactly. And what made me really sad was these two women who rightfully have career goals and are ambitious were dealing with, for instance, Unorthodox, with feeling like they're between a rock and a hard place. They need to, for their work, participate, but at the same time, their voice is not really being heard.
Yes, definitely. And I think it was maybe if there was potential desire to listen to, but I don't think so, because, decided also, I mean, this is very clear. That's the one example of a few where it's very interesting that it's always the woman, always the woman that needs to be saved. Well, I think, doesn't matter if you're men. I mean, there are different, but I think that men also, if there is, if you want to be saved by religion, maybe for men as well, they want to be, you know what I mean? It's
like, why is the story always of a woman getting saved and having sex with a man?
I mean, it's interesting,
outside.
the story of Shulam Din, he got, his book, great, acclaim and everything, but they didn't make a movie. Maybe it's not, I don't, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah. There's the audience shapes the media. You talk about that as well, about how you're still in the market and you need to create what sells.
Yeah, maybe this is the American one. Maybe this is the American one as well. That they think that same thing with music. They think that they need to go to the one that's gonna sell, and because sometimes we don't know, the safe one.
Yeah.
And there's some parallel with Muslim women or any kind of women who are coming from religious backgrounds, where there was like, this fetishization of the woman's body. I so
enjoy talking to you. Do you want to say anything, final words, or?
I wanted to say that I'm very happy, honored that I always admire your work. So what you're doing, and I'm very happy that you read, that we were able to engage, on my work. So yes, and that's all I want to say. You're doing amazing work and very inspiring. So
I appreciate it. Coming from you, I take that compliment all the way, because I see what went into your book. I feel like we're sisters in a similar passion project. So I really appreciate what you're saying. Yeah. Well,
Thank you, Frida.
I'm going to link your book in the video description so people can check it out. Anything else you wanted me to link, maybe?
No, do you want, maybe if you are interested, maybe to some, the trailer of maybe the film Castle in the Sky, where there's Melissa, Malky. I don't know if you saw this one. If you want and maybe one music video if you're interested, but otherwise.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jessica. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Frida.
And that's why the head and the internal organs must be removed before koshering. From the very first moment you see menstrual blood, that's when you'll be using this. This is a Badika cloth.
He said that we need to talk to you first.
How was your first week together?
And the Hasidic community is a group that typically doesn't cross over with us other folks in New York.
It doesn't go in.
How do people have sex?
Look how wide it can get.
It's not a joke.
I didn't laugh and cry.
I thought you'd like it.
So it's a joke.
I know nothing of sacrifice.
This is the Yidden, and this is the Goyim. This is Brooklyn.
This is Tenebus.
This is God's creation. This is where the chosen are re-chosen. Wow. This is the Hasidim.
Your grandparents did it.
And you?
Thank you very much. My mother, she loved poetry. But it's like building castles in the sky.